Head of the ECOWAS Election Observation Mission, Excellencies, members of the Permanent Representative Committee of the African Union, Excellencies, members of the diplomatic community, honorable members of the Pan-African Parliament, chairpersons and commissioners of the electoral management bodies, ladies and gentlemen of the media, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, a very good morning to you all. Good morning. Thank you very much. My name is Patience Chiraza, Director for Governance and Conflict Prevention in the Department of Political Affairs. And it is my honor to be your facilitator for the proceedings this morning. We welcome you to the presentation of the ECOWAS and the Commonwealth, and we will get straight into our proceedings. Allow me at this moment to call upon Her Excellency, the head of the African Union Election Observation Mission, to give a statement. Over to you, Excellency.
Thank you very much, Director. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, I'll read the report of the African Union as follows. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, I'll read the preliminary statement of the African Union Election Observation Mission as follows. The people of the Republic of Ghana went to the polls on the 7th of December 2024 to elect their president and members of parliament. At the invitation of the government of Ghana and the Electoral Commission, the chairperson of the African Union Commission deployed an African Union observation team to observe the elections. The mission represents African Union's efforts to promote transparent and credible elections and deepen democratic governance in Africa within the context of the African Charter on Democracy, Elections and Governance. The mission was led by myself and supported by Her Excellency Phumzile Mapungubwe, member of the Panel of the Wise and former Deputy President of the Republic of South Africa, as well as 60 short-term observers and technical and electoral experts drawn from 27 African countries. This deployment was preceded by the deployment of a pre-election assessment mission in Ghana from 28 October to 2 November 2024. The African Union Election Observation Mission commends the people of Ghana for their commitment to democratic principles as evidenced by the peaceful conduct on the 7th December. The AU mission witnessed a spirit of collaboration and patriotism among the electoral officials, the political party agents, the voters, and the security personnel deployed to the polling stations as they work together, respecting their different roles, but ensuring a seamless and transparent voting and counting processes with the necessary checks and balances in place. The African Union mission commends the government of the Republic of Ghana for creating conditions that enable the Electoral Commission to effectively deliver on its mandate, political leaders to engage with supporters, and the media and civil society to perform their roles without hindrance, allowing citizens to exercise their right to vote. As part of its methodology, the mission met the representatives of the government officials, political parties and independent candidates, the Electoral Commission, civil society organizations, the Inspector General of Police, diplomatic community, citizens observer groups, academia, and other observer missions. Throughout this preliminary statement, the mission offers a summary of its key findings and recommendations on the electoral process up to the closing and counting of the polls. This statement is issued while the election results process is still ongoing. The mission will issue the final report on a later date. Regarding the preliminary findings, the mission makes the following preliminary observations. The political context of the elections. Ghana's December 2024 general elections marked the country's 8th presidential transition since the return of multi-party democracy back in 1992. This reinforced its democratic reputation for predictable and rule-based presidential transitions, aligning with the African Union's election standards and international best practices. However, the elections took place against the backdrop of heightened political polarization, economic challenges, currency devaluation, corruption, high youth unemployment, disinformation and misinformation, regional insecurity, and illegal small-scale gold mining. On the legal framework, Ghana's legal framework for elections provides for and guarantees fundamental human rights and freedoms, including the right to political participation and freedom of expression, association, and assembly, which is in line with the African Union and regional standards and international best practices for democratic elections. Nevertheless, the mission noted some limitations in the legal framework regarding the use of public resources, campaign regulations, campaign financing. These gaps could lead to the misuse of such resources and the creation of an uneven playing field for the electoral process participants. On the election administration, the Electoral Commission of Ghana, an independent constitutional body established under the Electoral Commission Act, is mandated to oversee and manage all public elections and referenda in the country. The EC implemented all activities in its electoral calendar as scheduled, though there were some delays in some of the processes. Notably, the mission acknowledged the EC's efforts to enhance transparency in the process by having regular consultations with the civil society and invited the media to participate in one of the inter-party advisory committee meeting. The AU mission commented of materials to all regions and the efficiency of the biometric verification devices. The mission also acknowledges that the Electoral Commission communicated tirelessly on the printing and reprinting of ballot papers, which contributed to the postponing of special voting to 5 December 2024 in the eastern and central regions, respectively. It is, however, regrettable that there were reports of ballot papers that were alleged to be distributed outside the formal polling processes. However, the people of Ghana are commended for their vigilance in intercepting the said ballots, which could have tainted the integrity of the process. The mission commends the vigilance of voters, citizen observers, and political party and candidates' agents in the observation and monitoring of the polling process, counting of ballots, and tallying processes. On voter registration, this registration was conducted for 21 days between 7 May and 27 May 2024. In addition to the standard registration sites at the district offices, the EC deployed mobile teams to register voters A total of 1,746,518 new voters were registered, out of which 708,280 are first-time voters aged between 18 and 21 years. A final register of 18,774,159 voters was published by the Electoral Commission, of which 18,640,811 voters with biometric data, 131,478 special voters, and 1,870 voters without biometric data. All presidential candidates and political parties received a copy of the final register, further enhancing transparency and access to information in the process. Political party and candidate nominations. The EC conducted the candidate nomination exercise between 9 and 13 September 2024. On the 39 candidates who indicated their intention to contest the 2024 presidential election, only 13 candidates made it to the final list for the presidential election, 9 from political parties, and 4 as independent candidates. And for the parliamentary elections, 801 candidates composed of 111 independent candidates and 619 from political parties were nominated to contest for the 2,276 seats. Election campaign regulations and finance framework. The mission noted that the presidential candidates commit to a peaceful electoral process through signing the 4th Presidential Election Peace Pact on 20th November 2024. The campaign period was generally peaceful, and campaign's messaging focused on key issues such as public service delivery, efforts, economic development, civic education, and mining sector improvement. While acknowledging the existence of the Political Parties Law Act 574 of 2000, the mission noted the absence of a comprehensive legal framework to regulate campaign timeline and funding. Gender equality and inclusion in the electoral process. The majority of this general election is women, with a total number of 9,689,980 registered voters. However, women are there was only one female candidate out of the 12 presidential candidates, while in the parliamentary ballot there were 119 female candidates, which is 17%, compared to the 682 males. The mission also notes that youth and persons with disabilities are underrepresented as candidates. The mission commends the 25% reduction in filing fees to 75,000 Ghanaian cedis for women and people with disabilities, and the EC's provision for tactile ballots for visually impaired voters. The media environment. The African Union Election Observation Mission acknowledged the role played by the media in disseminating information throughout the election period. The Electoral Commission also provided regular media briefings on election day and responded to reports emanating from around the country. The mission noted the access of journalists to tallying centers, resulting in timely dissemination of information. The role of civil society organizations. The African Union Election Observation Mission acknowledged the active role of the civil society organizations played in Ghana's electoral process, which is aligned with the African Union Charter on Democracy, Elections and Governance. The CSOs in Ghana organized themselves into networks for purposes of observing to improve transparency and credibility of the elections, primarily through the deployment of massive election observers and conduct a parallel vote rules set by the CSOs to monitor electoral process and offer media and rapid response initiatives. On voting, special voting, Ghana provides one of the growing instances of special voting which accommodates persons who will be on official duty on election day to exercise their right to vote. The African Union Mission observed special voting in Greater Accra on 2 December 2024 and in Eastern Region on 5 December 2024, where polling was conducted in a largely compliant, peaceful, and orderly manner. There was consistency between how polling was conducted for special voting and on election day, only the counting and tabulation process that was done on 7 December. The election day observation. On election day, the African Union Election Observation Mission deployed 16 short-term observers to 14 of the 16 regions across Ghana. They observed opening and closing procedures in 13 regions and visited a total of 442 polling units to observe voting. In most polling stations, the atmosphere was generally calm and peaceful. Opening of polling. The mission noted that all the polling stations visited opened on time, apart from 2 stations, one in the Eastern Region and another in Oti, which opened late due to the late arrival of materials and polling staff and the failure of the BVDs. The voting process. The mission noted that the EC maintained a maximum threshold of 749 voters per polling station, improving efficiency in voter management and counting procedures. Voting proceeded uninterrupted throughout the day at the polling stations observed. However, report emerged of voting being interrupted in some areas of Greater Accra due to heavy rainfalls, but this did not affect the election process. Election materials. Despite the isolated case of delay in opening witnessed, election materials were available in sufficient quantities throughout the day, and the voter verification devices also performed as intended at the stations observed by the African Union Election Observation Mission. Polling stations. While all polling units were generally accessible to voters, only 6% of the stations observed were located on uneven ground where persons with disabilities would face challenges. The secrecy of the vote was guaranteed by the appropriate layout of all polling stations. At most of the polling stations visited, images of candidates and political parties were posted very close to the polling stations, despite the requirement of having no less than 100 meters within the polling stations. Election personnel and polling procedures. The mission noted that there was general uniformity in implementing prescribed procedures by polling officials who exhibited a high level of professionalism. A large percentage of polling personnel were women, and this is commendable. The voters needing assistance in 80% of the polling stations visited were provided necessary assistance by a person of their choice or a polling officer. Party agents and election observers. Authorized personnel, including political parties and candidates' agents, as well as observers, were present in majority of stations and were allowed to conduct their duties without restrictions. The mission noted that all party agents received a copy of the voter register and result sheets, further enhancing the transparency of the process. Security. Security personnel were present throughout the day and conducted themselves professionally. There were short queues outside most polling stations, and these remained generally peaceful and orderly. However, the mission noted some insecurity incidents reported by the Ghana Police Service and commends their timely interventions. Additionally, some election officials in the Bono region were arrested for various electoral offenses. The mission notes with concern the reported shooting incident, which claimed the life of one citizen, and encourages the security agencies to continue to put in place measures to avoid such incidents during such an important national process. The African Union Election Observation Mission acknowledges the level of professionalism exhibited by the security personnel deployed to the polling stations visited. No armed security was seen at the polling stations, and the police were commended for their swift response when they were called in to restore order. Closing of the polls. There were no queues at most polling stations at the time of closing. However, voters who were on the queue at some of the stations were allowed to vote. Closing and counting took place in a peaceful, open, and transparent atmosphere in the presence of voters, observers, party candidates, agents, and media. Polling staff were generally competent in carrying out their duties and demonstrated a sense of commitment to the process. Commendable practices. Establishing a maximum threshold of 749 voters per polling station, ensuring the efficiency of the election administration, ensuring adequate electoral materials, and limiting the possibility of long queues. Allowing political party agents to put their own seal on ballot boxes to secure the vote. Inclusive vote counting processes conducted transparently, fostering public trust in the electoral process. Access to the voter register for party agents at each polling station, which enabled verification of the voters by the political party agents. Reduction of candidate nomination fees for women and persons with disabilities, promoting greater inclusivity and candidate participation. Regular press conference by the Ghana Police Service on security matters to enhancing public awareness of polling day security. The active involvement of the Anti-Corruption Commission in policing corrupt practices, such as vote buying, which can corrupt the electoral process. publishing election, petitioning, and litigation procedures to enhance understanding and use by election stakeholders in the event of election disputes. Granting of media access to tallying centers and allowing them to publish declared results to limit information gaps in the electoral process. Use of multiple options to verify voters using the BVDs, which limits chances of registered voters being turned away. Conclusion and recommendations. Conclusion. The African Union Election Observation Mission commends the people of Ghana for their commitment to democratic principles as evidenced by the peaceful conduct of the 7 December 2024 general elections. The overall electoral process adhered to regional and international standards, reinforcing Ghana's democratic credentials. While the government and people of Ghana and the Electoral Commission set high standards in management of electoral processes that other African Union member states should emulate, the African Union Mission offers some recommendations on areas that can be improved. Recommendations to the government and the Parliament of Ghana. 1. Gender equality. To strengthen its commitment to gender equality by implementing measures to align with the African Union Charter on Democracy, Elections and Governance, the African Union Agenda 2063, and international benchmarks such as CEDAW. 2. Affirmative action. Enact affirmative action legislation to enhance the participation of underrepresented groups, including women, youth, and people with disabilities in elective offices. 3. Campaign finance. Develop comprehensive campaign finance legislation to regulate the misuse of state resources and ensure a level playing field. To the political parties. 1. Inclusivity. Adopt a more inclusive approach through internal capacity building and civic education to nominate and support candidates from underrepresented groups, particularly women, youth. On youth participation, put in place the registered voters in order to encourage them to exercise their right to vote and select leaders of their choice. To the civil society organizations, on election observation, continue with peaceful, inclusive, transparent, and credible election in Ghana by monitoring election, design civic education methodologies targeted on the youth to improve their participation. To the Electoral Commission, on stakeholder consultations, maintain and enhance regular stakeholder consultations to promote transparency and inclusivity in the electoral process. On ballot security, consider measures to mitigate the production of counterfeit ballot papers by improving the security features of the ballot papers. Polling stations, increase the number of polling stations in sparsely populated areas in order to reduce the distances between polling stations, particularly in rural areas. On the signage, improve the directional signage of polling stations to ensure easy identification and access. The mission lauds the National Patriotic Party presidential candidate, His Excellency Dr. Mahamadou Bawumia, for demonstrating statesmanship by accepting the results of the election according to the party's tally and conceding defeat prior to the official declaration of presidential results. Indeed, Ghana remains the beacon of democracy and the home of Pan-Africanism, as it upholds the values set by our forefathers in putting the country and people first. The African Union Election Observation Mission further commends Dr. Bahomia for going further to congratulate President-elect John Dramani Mahama for his election victory. Thank you, Ghana, for continuing to exhibit exemplary leadership for the region and the continent at large. Issued in Accra, Ghana on 9 December 2024. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Your Excellency, for your statement. We'll now invite His Excellency, the head of the ECOWAS Observation Mission, and I'll ask the media to adjust your mics so that you can also keep the statement.
Thank you, Your Excellency, and well done for that very short speech. Well, don't laugh first. Usually these declarations intend to give all the reports that we receive. So I will start by also recognizing Your Excellency Sahel Work Zwede, the former president of Ethiopia and head of the African Union Election Observer Mission. I will also recognize my boss, Jonathan GCFR, the former president of the Federal Republic of Nigeria and head of the West African Elders Forum. Your Excellency, Makwesi Eric Masisi, former president of the Republic of Botswana and head of the Commonwealth of Nations Election Observer Mission. Your Excellency Leonardo Santos Simao, Special Representative of the United Nations Secretary General and Head of the United Nations Office for West Africa and the Sahel. Your Excellency Boubacar Blaise Jaini, Deputy Head of the ECOWAS Election Observation Mission, my supporter. Your Excellency Ambassador Abdel Fattah Musa, ECOWAS Commissioner for Political Affairs, Peace and Security. Your Excellency Ambassador Aisha Abdullahi, former Commissioner of Political Affairs, African Union and head of YAGA Africa Election Observers. Your Excellency Mohamed Lawal Ghana, the resident representative of the President of the ECOWAS Commission in Ghana, distinguished head of other election observation missions, distinguished observers, guests, ladies and gentlemen. I will read the preliminary declaration of the general election in Ghana today, 9th of December 2024. I'll start by introduction. On the 7th of December, Ghanaians went to the poll to elect the President of the Republic and 276 members of parliament in 40,607 police stations across the 16th 2024. Special voting was conducted by security agents, media, and other on-duty personnel across 328 polling stations. In keeping with the provisions of the Article 14 and 16 of ECOWAS Protocol on Democracy and Good Governance, supplementary to the protocol relating to the mechanism of conflict prevention, management, resolution, peacekeeping, and security, the President of ECOWAS Commission, His Excellency Dr. Aliou Touré, deployed an election observation mission to the 7th December elections. The 141-member mission is led by myself, Mohammed Namadi Sambo, GCON, former Vice President of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, and assisted by Ambassador Boubacar Blake Jaye, former Foreign Minister of the Republic of Gambia. The ECOWAS mission is facilitated by a technical team from ECOWAS Commission, led by Commissioner for Political Affairs, Peace and Security, Ambassador Abdul, Permanent Representative Committees, PRC, the Community Court of Justice, the Foreign Affairs Ministries, and electoral management bodies of ECOWAS member states, as well as representatives of civil society experts from across West Africa. In line with the ECOWAS Commission's continuous support and engagement with member states holding election, the ECOWAS Electoral Observation Mission was preceded in July 2024 by a pre-election fact-finding mission, which assessed the level of preparedness of the country for the conduct of the 2024 general election. Subsequently, in September 2024, the Commission carried out a series of engagements with the Ghanaian media, civil society organizations, peace actors, security agencies, and political parties to address issues of misinformation and disinformation during the campaigns and to build stakeholders' trust in the electoral process while securing their commitment to peaceful polls. Finally, the ECOWAS Commission provided financial support to strengthen the work of key stakeholders engaged in advocacy for a credible and peaceful electoral process, including the National Commission on Civic Education, the National Peace Council, MPC, the Coalition of Domestic Election Observers, CODEO, and the Foundation for Security and Development in Africa, FOSDA. 2. Contest of the 2024 general elections. Since the inception of its Fourth Republic, Ghana has consistently held elections at regular intervals on 8 occasions and yielded 3 peaceful transitions of power among the 2 major political parties wielding effective monopoly over the political space. The New Patriotic Party, MPP, and the National Democratic Party, NDC. This inviolable track record, which has positioned Ghana as a beacon of democracy in the West African sub-region, was at stake, and the country prepared for its 9th unbroken general election. It is also worth noting that since the restoration of constitutional order in 1992, no governing party has managed to secure 3 consecutive 4-year mandate, while the MPP made breaking the 8th a cornerstone of its campaign. The NDC was equally determined to prevent this from happening. The 2024 election process is taking place in a context dominated by cumulative impact of the COVID-19 pandemic, which caused severe economic disruption across the globe, the global economic downturn, and the Russian-Ukraine war on food security, youth unemployment, and inflationary pressures on the economies of Ghana and many other African countries. This situation and other governance challenges are largely blamed for the rapid proliferation of illegal artisanal gold mining, locally referred to as galamsey, which has had negative consequences on the environment, including pollution of water bodies and destruction of forest reserves. Third, for most of the electorate, the frustration experienced in daily life and candidates' plan for addressing these challenges were the topmost concern, ultimately making the campaign relatively issue-based. Furthermore, during the electoral campaign, candidates and political parties relied heavily on social media and door-to-door canvassing to sell their manifestos and canvass for votes. Unfortunately, there are incidences of the use of vile propaganda, misinformation and disinformation, fake news, hate speech, and insightful language with ethno-religious undertone on the various social media platforms. This situation initially led to some tensions, which later subsided following influential personalities and institutions escorting the major political parties to revert to issue-based campaigning and appeal for tolerance. To cap it all, on the 28th of November 2024, under the auspices of the National Peace Council, all presidential candidates signed a peace pact that committed them to ensuring a peaceful electoral process. 3. Engagement with stakeholders. Upon arrival in Accra on the 2nd of December 2024, the head of mission and his delegation paid a courtesy call on the President of the Republic, His Excellency Nana Addo Taka Akufo-Addo, and held meetings with critical stakeholders in the process, including Electoral Commission of Ghana, the Ghana Police Service, civil society organizations, and some presidential candidates. During these meetings, the head of mission underscores the necessity to uphold and consolidate Ghana's exemplary democratic track record by ensuring peaceful and credible elections. On Monday, 2nd December 2024, ECOWAS long-term observer mission visited polling stations in Nkwanta, Dambai, Supin, Asokwa, Wa, Sifwi, Weaso, Bodi, Akontombra, Joboso, Tamale, and Damongo districts. Similarly, on the 5th of December, the ECOWAS observed the exercise in Jupin's house, Suhum, Isukado, Sekondi, Tokoradi, Shama, and Wasi East districts of the eastern and western regions, respectively. The mission noted that the polling stations for special voting were generally set up in a way that guaranteed the secrecy of the vote. Election materials were available in sufficient quantities. The biometric verification devices, DVDs, functioned properly. Polling officials were professional in their conduct. Party agents were present at the polling station, and there was discreet but professional presence of security agents. 5. Election Day observations. The mission deployed 70 observer teams to 54 urban and rural districts across the 16 regions of Ghana. These observation teams visited a total of 871 polling stations. On the basis of their report, the mission notes the following. A. Opening of the polls. In all polling stations visited, polling commenced within the first hour of the stipulated time, with voting starting between 7 and 7:30 a.m. Voting materials and polling agents were reported to have arrived at the polling stations between 6 a.m. and 7 a.m. Polling centers were generally easy to locate and accessible. 93.2% of the polling stations were accessible to persons living with disabilities. The atmosphere at polling centers was generally peaceful and orderly, with security agents present in 97% of the centers visited. In general, party agents from the New Patriotic Party (NPP) and the National Democratic Congress (NDC) were present at the polling stations visited, with uneven representation by some of the minor parties and candidates. The ECOWAS observers noted the presence of domestic observers, particularly the Coalition of Domestic Election Observers, CODIO, at all the polling centers visited. He also registered the presence of other international election observers and local monitoring teams in many of the centers, including the African Union, European Union, the Commonwealth, the British High Commission, the Australian Embassy, the National Commission for Civic Education, and the National Peace Council, and the Institute for Democratic Governance, and the National Christian Association, NCA. B. The voting process. 99% of the polling stations visited were set up in a way that guaranteed the secrecy of the ballot. In few cases, however, such as at polling station number 24 at Volta Region Museum in Ho Municipal District, the voting cubicle was placed in such a manner that it did not provide adequate covering for voters to secretly express their choice. Voters generally presented a form of identification before voting. However, in 13% of the polling stations visited, observers witnessed voters voting without presenting physical voter identification card. Such voters had their names confirmed in the voters register and their identity verified using biometric verification devices, BVDs. In all polling stations visited, voters were systematically marked with indelible ink after casting their vote. Tactile ballot guides were available to enable visually impaired voters to independently cast their votes in 7.22% of the polling stations visited. Similarly, in 12.1% of cases, special tents were set up for PWDs voting. Aged voters were observed receiving assistance to cast their votes in 21% of the polling stations. Party agents were present in all the polling stations visited. However, the party agents were mainly from the MPP and NDC, with the former present in 92.3% of polling stations visited, and the latter present in 89.12% in the start of the voting process. There were instances of political canvassing around the vicinity of polling stations in approximately 4% of the places. A steady flow of voters in orderly queues, particularly women and youth, was observed at all the polling centers. The increase in the number of polling centers to 40,647 compared to 33,000 in the 2020 electoral cycle greatly reduced overcrowding and allowed voters to pace their arrival. C. Closing and counting. At the official closing time of 5 p.m., there were still voters in queues waiting to vote in 7.7% of polling stations visited. In line with the provisions of the electoral law, these voters were allowed to cast their vote. In most polling station staff commenced sorting, tabulating, and counting the votes immediately after the close of polls. This was done in the presence of both party agents and observers. In most polling stations visited, there were arrangements made for adequate lighting during vote counting. However, 3.77% of the polling stations visited were dimly lit, which led to challenges during the vote counting process. After the vote counting, the polling agents recorded the candidates' scores on the official result sheet, the pink sheet, and provided copies to the party agents present. 6. Preliminary conclusions. On the basis of the foregoing, the ECOWAS Election Observation Mission notes that despite a few minor challenges, the conduct of the 2024 general election was largely peaceful and to a significant extent complies with the national and regional normative framework. The professionalism of the polling staff and the effective presence of security agents at polling venues ensured that Ghanaian voters were able to freely and secretly express their choice in an atmosphere that guaranteed their safety. However, the mission was made aware and regretted the isolated contributed to the inclusivity of the process. The mission commends high sense of professionalism and patriotism exhibited by polling staff, the security agents, and electorates, who collectively played their part in ensuring the transparent and peaceful conduct of the 2024 general election. The mission also commends the high sense of statesmanship displayed by the presidential candidates in living up to their commitment under the Peace Pact. The mission particularly recognizes the magnanimity of the presidential candidate of the ruling New Patriotic Party, His Excellency Mahamudu Bawumia, for conceding defeat even before the official declaration result of the presidential election, which contributed to dousing tension in the country. The mission also congratulates the President-elect, His Excellency John Dramani Mahama, for his victory at the polls. The ECOWAS Electoral Observation Mission congratulates the good people of Ghana and wishes them continued peace, progress, and development. Finally, the ECOWAS Observation Mission salutes the outgoing President, His Excellency Nana Addo Dankwa Akufo-Addo, for his able stewardship of this important ECOWAS member state, Ghana, for his leadership, mediation efforts, and regional integration initiatives on behalf of the community, including during his selfless service as a two-term chairman of the authority of ECOWAS, head of states and government. This is done in Accra, the 9th day of December 2024. Thank you. God bless you.
Thank you, Your Excellency, for your statement. And now we'll hear the statement from His Excellency, the Head of Mission for the Commonwealth Observer Mission. And the media, if you could adjust your microphones.
Thank you very much, Director of Ceremonies. This is the interim statement from the Commonwealth Observer Group. Good morning, Excellencies, members of the diplomatic corps, the media, fellow observers, ladies and gentlemen, and the people of Ghana. Thank you for honoring our invitation. The Commonwealth is honored to have been invited to observe Ghana's 2024 general elections, following the pre-election assessment mission in October and the subsequent invitation from the Electoral Commission of Ghana. The Commonwealth Secretary General, Right Honourable Patricia Scotland, King's Council, constituted our group to observe Ghana's 9th presidential and parliamentary elections since